Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Random Gamer Riven and I will be your host on today's randomised gaming weekly live stream. So it is Wednesday, the 29th of April 2020, and in today's live stream I will be looking at Super R-Type on the Super Nintendo. Super R-Type, which in itself is a port of the R-Type 2 arcade game, but with a few additional extras and changes. Most noticeably, the original arcade game only has 6 levels. Super R-Type adds in a 7th level, and that's actually the new starting level. So the first level is all new for the Super Nintendo version. It was originally released in 1991 in Japan, and it was subsequently released elsewhere in the world following that. I believe the European release wasn't till 92. And it was developed by Irem. and it was published by Irem. So level we have, obviously you got easy, normal, hard. Now kids, okay, so I don't want to do kids, don't do easy, don't do normal. Well, I might do normal. There is hard. There is actually a pro difficulty, which is the ending. You get to see the true ending and everything on, but you have to beat hard. Now, R-Type is notoriously hard. It's one of those infuriating shooters that if you die and make a mistake on, you lose all your power-ups. And in some cases, in the later runs, and I saw a guy doing a playthrough on the pro run, saying if you die, you have to start over because that's pretty much it for your run. So that's what's infuriating with R-Type. It was meant to be brutally hard originally. In fact, all the Irem games are brutally hard, but they stayed brutally hard, and that's probably one of the reasons why Irem's shmup series has all died out. Because they were just too hard for too long. I mean, it's alright having one or two hard moments. An R-Type final is as brutally hard as the others, but yeah. In the long run, it doesn't attract gamers when your game is so hard. So this is another change. They've added in a new intro for the Super Nintendo one. Don't know if it contains parts of the original arcade intro or not. No, it doesn't. That's actually... So really straightforward. Shoot and charge shot. And basically this is two buttons. You've... Charge shot. No, it might even be one button as I recall. Because one... No, yeah. A will be launch your orb when you get it. So this is probably one of those iconic shooters. Probably one of those games that really did drive the shoot 'em up genre forward, R-Type. It may be a little bit dated now. The sequel is probably definitely better looking and playing than the original. And it had some great music, but I think ultimately what let R-Type down just was the difficulty in the end. It's just infuriating when you die, you then lose all your power-ups. And there's nothing worse than being punished again constantly for one mistake. So yeah, basically if you die in this on the final difficulty, you're in for a very rough ride. There is quite a bit of slowdown in this, I will admit. But it's actually a very, very faithful port to R-Type 2 with additional content, so... Okay, that's... So there I've got the orb, and you can actually put the orb on the front and the back, depending where it lands. So on the front it will, and on the back it will block shots if the shots hit the orb. And there's an automatic transition into the boss. Ah. Now I remember why I hated this opening stage. I just realised you basically don't have a transition. You basically don't get... There's no checkpoint. So basically, if you die, you go back to the start. Yes, I certainly didn't pick an easy shmup tonight, so we'll just see how far I can get through it. It's been a long time since I finished R-Type 2. And it is a game you do definitely need to learn, so I must try not to make the same mistakes. And that last time was I didn't shoot enough of the enemies and keep the forward area clear. Well, no, let's not make... It's going to be a long string. Fortunately, it does have some fantastic music, the Super Nintendo version of R-Type 2, and these additional tracks for the Super Nintendo version are really, really good. Right, since that was the first stage, there's not much point in continuing. I might just go straight back and start again. Just going to check. Hang with me a second. Okay, that was a pretty disastrous start. Never mind, that last one was me trying to read something. Just checking to make sure there's not a limited number of continues. Else I might be replaying this stage an awful lot. Right, gotcha. And just take a quick sip of my cup of tea. So that was the demo level. That was the opening level. Really, that is sort of a trial warm-up stage. So I'll try to actually stay awake. I was a little bit tired from yesterday. So, hi there, Sturo. Thanks for joining today's randomised gaming stream. I'll be trying to get as far through R-Type 2 or Super R-Type as I can. Well, best the SNES port Super R-Type. I'm not sure how far I will actually get. Probably nowhere near the end. But I hopeful to get to at least the third stage or the second arcade stage, which is where things ramp up exponentially. It's been a long time since I played through any of the R-Type games. I must admit, I did actually, the last one I probably actually sat down and played properly was R-Type Final. I never actually finished R-Type Final. I got to about the 5th stage. It was one of those games that was just, it got so annoyingly hard at points. It was just infuriating. It was literally just learning the pattern of every single enemy maneuver. Oh. Okay, pay attention, Riven, pay attention. So yeah, this is one of those games that talking and streaming is going to be a bit tricky. This is a game that requires precision perfect gameplay. It also requires precision perfect knowledge of the game, which I don't have. It's been a very long time since I played it. Try and do as best as I can. Right. Right, watch those sneaky missiles. Must admit, my first experience of R-Type 2 wasn't actually in the arcade. I never remember seeing the arcade around that much. The sequel, I saw it a few times, but not as much as some of the other games. I think Irem, by the time Irem did R-Type 2, because the original was one of those games that everyone had, and then I think everyone got a bit fed up with it because they realised how brutally hard it was. It looked great, the original, and this one looked great, but once you started getting down to it, the game was just too hard for its own good. I must admit, I much prefer R-Type Leo, which we did do a playthrough on the channel. I think that's a much more relaxed shooter, especially in two-player mode, because the fact you can both play concurrently. And I kind of wish these earlier R-Types had been included a two-player support. So on the plus side, if you like this video and decide that you'd quite like to play R-Type 2, although you can't play the SNES, actually you probably can play the SNES one on Virtual Console, you can get R-Type 1 and 2 on the PS4 and I believe Xbox One, 360, PS3 in the Dimensions collection, which is a perfect port of the, well, near perfect port of the first two games, and includes arcade and new visuals for both, so that's well worth picking up. We've got both, actually we've got the PS4 version and the 360 one. It was quite an early 360 game that they only fairly recently ported. I'm going to stick with the red laser. Do I want the bouncy laser? Well, I've got it anyway. Well, I certainly want it for the next stage. This next level 2 is one of my most hated stages. Ah, yeah, so one change you will notice is you do get these intermission sections in the SNES version. Now I need to... Leo is a lot more relaxed than the original R-Types. The original R-Types are probably the original R-Type is one of the worst coin munchers ever. It's strange. A lot of arcade games actually did have a sort of requirement that you could 1cc them, but games like this are not games you'll ever 1cc on your first go. They requires months of practice. Now you can actually shoot the mask off this thing, and when you do, it's revealed to be the boss from the original game kept alive on some sort of ventilation thing. Yeah, there we go. Brado back for revenge. He also makes an appearance in R-Type 3 as well. Actually, R-Type 3 is probably the easiest of the original. Or R-Type Delta. Oh, that's closing in. I need to speed up. Gotcha. Okay, that's nice. That's nice. R-Type Leo, interesting. So R-Type Final was the PS2 only game. R-Type Delta was PS2 only. There were the two tactical RPGs on the PSP, which only one got released. The sequel had probably one of the weirdest names of the tactical RPGs. But effectively the series went R-Type 1, R-Type 2, R-Type Leo, which was also the last of the arcade games. R-Type Leo was a two-player one. It was also not developed by Irem directly. It was developed by their parent company, I believe. Although it's a really, really good. Then you get R-Type 3 on the Super Nintendo. Then you get R-Type Delta on the PS1. No worries. So yeah, R-Type Delta, R-Type Final. I think for a long time now there have been calls for a new R-Type game. We've not yet had one. But there is R-Type Dimensions, was a remake of, basically a modern remake of the original two arcade games. Annoyingly, R-Type Leo has largely not been reissued on much. And it's one of my more favourite ones, so... Get that behind me, because that's where I want it at the minute. Go to the front. So yeah, one of the tactics is to just pause that second. My TV's blanked. So yeah, unfortunately the SCART I've got, I think sometimes it's getting interference, so occasionally I may have to briefly pause it if it blank screens. Or I should actually watch the OBS. Okay, you're back, are you, Sturo? I'll just actually bring up the OBS stream, because that... Oh! Yeah, this port has an awful lot of slowdown. It's certainly one of the worst for slowdown. But that was one of the issues with the Super Nintendo. It did have a processing issue. Apparently the SNES, from what I understand, had quite a low speed processor that did plague a lot of games. It's why it struggled with a lot of arcade-like games, so scrolling beat-em-ups and shooters. There aren't a huge number on the SNES, although some developers were able to get around the hardware limitations to give some impressive results. You definitely notice a slowdown on quite a few games. Now, this level 2 has actually been changed quite a bit from the arcade one, because in the arcade one, half the stage is literally just water everywhere. So the stages have been, some of the stages have been redesigned in Super R-Type, so they do look a bit different to their original arcade versions. This one definitely looks quite a bit different. It's a bit weird. This is not quite the arcade game, but it's not its own game, so to speak. Probably one of the things I slightly... It's always a bit of a weird one, because it probably should have been just a direct port. It always felt a bit weird, the fact that they kind of took stuff out, added stuff in, so it doesn't then become its own game. It's not a straight port of the arcade game. It's just sort of this weird hybrid that doesn't quite tick the boxes it perhaps should do. Is the Oh, damn it. Gotta watch those bugs. And just take a swig of tea there. So unlike last night's stream, I cannot swig my tea while playing. I can do, but I'll almost certainly die then. Yeah, and in the arcade version, this stage is just full of water, so you have like a... But I suppose for an early Super Nintendo game, it does look very good. Is it as good as something, say, Axelate? I'm not so sure. I'm always a huge fan of Axelate. Which was another sort of early Super Nintendo game with some great visual effects. Another great shooter that was SNES exclusive. What annoys me actually is the mechanic about changing the force. I don't know why there isn't a button so you can actually just switch which side, so you can actually rotate the force around you. Probably one of the things I would say one of the downers in R-Type. There's no reason really to have the weird, these like... So yeah, having the stronger shot's really helpful because it does shoot through everything. Also got to be careful there, make sure I want to avoid... So I've got to get to that boss bit again. So there are a few additional... Oh, one of the bugs. Got to watch the bugs. So the sub-boss in this level originally has 2 bosses. And the version you saw earlier when I got to it the first time on this run is actually, it's a bit different to how it looked in the arcade game. And yes, swigging your tea and trying to play, as I said, not a good idea. Yeah, it'd be really handy to actually rotate the force around you. I mean, it's great you can launch it, but it's always really annoying if you need to flip it quickly. And it's something I do feel R-Type's lack. There are a few mechanics I've always felt R-Type lacking, so I'm going to say having respawn deaths would be a blessing. Although some people may feel that goes against the grain of R-Type's design, I would argue that really it needs that to sort of advance the game. I mean, what you could easily do is just have a score increment so you know how many lives you lost. So if the player loses a life, do like the Capcom games did and just increment the 1 or whatever. Capcom games used to increment the final digit, and in the later games they used to increment the final 2 digits, so you knew how many credits up to 99 they'd used. Some of the early Capcom games only incremented up to 10, but a lot of games people would end up using more than 10 credits on to finish, and thus it would make it look like they'd done a seamless playthrough when they hadn't. Okay, red is homing missiles, which I'll go for because I could do with them. Right, here comes that mini boss again. And that longest moment is when you're waiting for that charge. Oh, come on, that was the super shot. There's something up with the charge I've noticed. Sometimes it doesn't initiate the ball charge. So basically, if you charge it up, it's actually a bug. Sometimes it's not actually. So you charge up to there, and you should get the whirly one. Yeah, Capcom used it in almost all their games, where basically it increments the last digit by 1 if you use a credit, and in later games they actually said the 2. So there are a lot of videos you can tell people haven't done a flawless run by whether they've incremented credits. Right, let's see if we can get that boss this time. But yeah, a couple of times I've noticed the shot definitely doesn't come out sometimes. So the supercharged shot there should do. There, you see, that didn't come out. Why is that? Does it overheat? So if I charge it down for long enough. Ah, you only get a small window, that's why. Okay. Do watch that water, they do force you up, as you can probably see me fighting against it. They do like to use the enemies to herd you, and this is one of those games where you really have to pay attention to everything on screen at every moment. Yeah, slowdown does definitely. I think some of the slowdown may well be deliberate. A lot of shooters do use slowdown to help the player at certain points. So not all slow. So there was a common mistake in gaming magazines in the 90s, even 2000s, even now, where they'll complain about slowdown and they're not actually aware some slowdown is intentional. But I don't think all the slowdown in this is intentional. Yeah, the water pushes you up. In the arcade version, the level splits. You have water at half the screen. So basically, when you go into it, I think it slightly changes the speed at which you control. It has this weird feeling. You feel like you're suddenly in something in the arcade version. But unfortunately, most of the water and the water effects are actually largely missing. But as you see there, I'm not actually touching anything. By moving there, it'll force me down. But yeah, a lot of the water from the arcade version, so a lot of the water effects from the arcade stage of level 2, because this, although I'm on level 3, this is the arcade level 2, is sadly missing. Right, I'm going to concentrate on this next bit, try and get through it this time. I've really got to concentrate. But this is definitely a game that said you've got to keep your eye on every single ounce of the screen. You've got to know where those enemies are coming from and what hazards you're going to be facing in the next second or two. So are enemies going to be shooting? Are you going to have the worm things going to be rolling? Are some of these enemies going to be spawning additional enemies? So the spawn things you always want to get down as quickly as possible. If you're something that can put additional enemies on screen, kill it as fast as possible. And that's the thing with a lot of the power-up weapons. You actually discover that most of your super strike is by far the strongest weapon in the game. This stage is annoying, and this boss is even more annoying as well. It's got the weird thing that goes up and down in the centre. That's of course if I can get to this boss. Well, on the plus side I've got to stage 3, which I'm quite pleased about seeing, as it's been a few, but it's definitely a game you do need to practice at, and definitely a game not to play if you're a touch tired as well. It's one that requires absolute flawless concentration. And a very precise memory, as you do have to remember the attack patterns of everything. I can kind of see why the R-Type series perhaps didn't do as well as it did over time. I think it was one of those series that I would argue is a one-trick pony. Once you played the first one, you didn't need to play any of the others, which is probably its core gameplay issue. The sequels didn't really add anything in between. I think the third one on SNES did some nice effects, but again, you had some really great levels, and again, it went back still some sort of weird bungly levels. R-Type Delta was actually probably one of the better ones on PS1. Then you had R-Type Final as well on PS2, which was supposed to be the final R-Type game. Hence the name R-Type Final. And that was just so brutally hard. I mean, it's a great game, it's just brutally hard to the point that it was... Strangely, Irem had a habit of turning out a lot of arcade games. They reused the death system in a lot of them, so games like Image Fight is just as brutally mind-numbing. Even X Multiplier, a lot of their arcade shooters had that horrible thing where you die, you'd reset, and I think towards the end people got a bit fed up with it because it was just so punishing. Because one mistake and suddenly you'll find you're dying at sections you had previously finished because you just have no power-ups. Ah, again. That sub-boss section is really annoying. So I hope you're enjoying the stream. As always, if you do like our streams, please do hit that like button. I'm going to carry on doing them at least for a few more weeks while the lockdown remains in place in the UK. I will probably take a break once it's finished, or I might start doing slightly less irregular streams, but we're certainly interested to see if you guys are all enjoying the weekly streams. And if you've got any suggestions for games you'd like to see, please do leave something in the comments. As I mentioned before, at the minute we have the Super Nintendo out, we have the PlayStation 2, we can therefore do PS1 games. I should say that's a Japanese, a modded PS2, so we can play Japanese and US games. The Saturn, and I've got the GameCube and the Game Boy Advance. Can't guarantee we'll be able to do all your suggestions, but if we have the game in question that you request, we will certainly, and we haven't covered it recently, or it's not a game with content we're aware of there's content IDs, we will definitely stream it. Although I will say no anime tie-ins, things like that, games that use feature film music, because they're highly likely to get content IDs. I have had a few obscure content IDs as well on the channel in the past, so there's a few games I wouldn't have thought I got content IDs for, I did for various reasons. Such as Pinball Graffiti was an interesting one. It turned out it was done by JVC Music, and it turned out they used a lot of their stock music in it. It's a rather obscure Saturn game very few people have ever played. Right, let's see if I can get to this boss. I do really like the music for this one. It's very... Can also use the force as a battering ram as well, which is always quite helpful. Ooh, that's... Ooh, that was close. And if you hold down the button, you can call it back towards you. Oh, gotta stay live for that bit. So glad to see you're all liking the video. Thanks for all the likes. Apologies, it's not a flawless run, but I think it's always a good idea to show you the makings of learning a game, because one of the things that really annoys me is the amount of videos I see with like flawless runs. Now occasionally you do get people, like I saw one on R-Type today where the guy actually recorded the game. He said it'd taken him months of practice, and that's like great, you know the guy's done it properly. A lot of them really annoy me, these channels these days, because I can tell when they're using emulators, and you're not supposed to be using emulators unless you actually have the real game. And the other thing is a lot of them cheat and use save states, and that kind of spoils it a lot, because there's a lot of people think, oh, why isn't these runs perfect? And it's like, well, actually most of these perfect runs are not genuine runs. They're using tools and save states and other weird factors. Because when I see channels turning out perfect run videos every day, there's no way you're not cheating, because you just can't perfect games that quickly. Just outrun footage. Yeah, those type of scenarios you should actually shouldn't have actually got a strike. Is it a content ID or was it a strike? Because if it was a strike, you can actually have a proper go at them. Content IDs are when they match it and say, hey, you can't use this. They have relaxed a lot of this stuff now, but the problem you do have to watch is there are a lot of fake claimants who will make... I still actually have one of our videos, you may notice our... Oh, that damn bug thing. I've really got to stay down low for that bit. Got to remember that, stay low. Because people confuse content IDs as strikes. Content ID just means you can't monetize it, because it will say, or sometimes you can monetize it, it just means you've got certain restrictions on it. Strikes are, of course, proper, where your YouTube channel just receives a basically demerit for... But it's weird because YouTube's strange. The fact the gaming list lets you select almost any video game in history, and yet some publishers said, well, actually, you shouldn't be showing our games, yada yada. It's sort of weird. YouTube needs to sort of actually get its gaming principles sorted out to some degree, because it can recommend, oh hey, do you want to do this game, and then actually when you look, oh no, it doesn't actually want you to stream this game because there's content IDs. So there's a weird conflict with the system. As a channel, as we maintain original footage largely, we are one of those channels that are applying for basically archiving, because a lot of these games are not properly recorded, and so many games... Yeah, that's the thing. I actually don't use, so I'll give you a little thing. So I still have industry contacts, so I can still go for video games, go directly to industry contacts. And a couple of times said, this is screwed up, get it... Just so you know, because a lot of the time they aren't appreciative when you get dodgy companies claiming money off their games and it's not them, and they will pretty much every single video game, but arguably there's interpretation rules. I mean, what the official rules are, if you actually... I've sort of looked it up, and basically, so one, you do need to own the game you're actually streaming, so you can't really be streaming emulated versions. And secondly, you need to have basically you need to make sure that either you're applying your own description, so me playing a section of it is okay. The other thing is games, you see, games technically are in a weird phenomenon where copyright's an interesting thing with them, because a game in its rawest form, so unlike music, you can play a soundtrack and you can just play it and it will run itself. A video game requires a performance which makes every person who plays the game unique, much like an acting performance, because the game, you can't, no game will run itself. You actually have to basically play the game and be talented enough to actually finish it. In some cases, the degree of skill required to finish a game is of an extremely high level that many normal people won't have, so it actually falls under a weird sort of half and half. It can be argued it's performance. Right, that's good. That's... Okay, so yeah, so this boss has actually been totally changed from the arcade version. I've just got to remember which way these worm things go. Basically, if you add your own creative, so in regards to copyright, you add your own creative take, but yeah, there is, they fall in a weird category, video games. It's because they're not, so if the game could play itself, then you basically this weird legal thing, which is what I've noticed with video games, is because a game requires a user's input. There's a whole performance argument. Admittedly, a lot of it actually needs to be argued out of in a court of law at present, because there's a lot of questions that still haven't been decided. But you do have to be a little bit mindful, because even YouTube, there are a lot of people who will just literally upload films and TVs and anime thing, which requires no input on behalf of the user. The other thing these days, quite a lot of video games companies do like you to stream. So EA have a weird policy where at one stage they were just saying you can stream anything. These days they basically have a weird policy where they're not going to give you permission to stream, but they basically don't want, so they kind of want you to stream, but they don't want you to say things that they don't like. So you have this weird thing where you can stream, but if they don't like your video, they will then, or if you don't basically upload a video to YouTube and they don't like it, they can take it down, which is probably what most of them have the policy of. If they don't like your video, they can take it down, but if they like it, they'll leave it up. Because ultimately, if you're a good video, if you link to where the game, if it can be bought, I mean, you can pick up Super R-Type, I believe, on Virtual Console. I suspect it was released on Virtual Console. I should actually double check that, but I'm pretty sure it is available on Virtual Console. And again, you can get this on so the PS4 and PS3. Of course, I should say I'm not a lawyer, so if you ever do have legal questions, do seek your own legal advice. And the other thing you do, the caveat I do need to mention that no one mentions, is the legal laws change where you are in the world, and technically if you release a video worldwide, you fall under the jurisdiction of every single country in the world. Which is something a lot of people forget when it comes to the legal side. You do actually fall under every single jurisdiction in the world. So technically uploading a video, you actually need to know the laws in every single country in the world. Because the minute you release it worldwide, you fall under the laws, not just in your own country, but in every country that your video can be viewed in. Which is what a lot of lawyers make the mistake of when you see, oh, this, and this on YouTube. Well, actually, it depends on the country you're in and what country the people that don't like your video or want to look into your video are in. So yeah, this is, as I said, and it can be an infuriatingly hard game at times. R-Type. Certainly learning is. So I've got to keep this up. I want to try and get this stage so I can see if I can get to the fourth one. This stage is actually quite heavily changed from the arcade version. The second stage, which is the first arcade one, is largely the same. I think it's been slightly shortened. In fact, I think most of the stages in this Super Nintendo version have been shortened. Well, basically the second stage in this is much closer to the third stage. But one thing I will say, if you ever do get a content sort of ID or something, it's actually a good idea to email the people responsible directly. Don't use YouTube's internal systems. YouTube's internal systems are currently crap. unfortunately, and you really need to contact the people via email and try and get them to release it that way. The other thing, if necessary, if you need to, contact Sega or whichever developers. So if it's a game, so if you have an incorrect match with a game, you need to contact the actual developers, because they won't be too happy. Because the other week we actually had a Breath of the Wild got content ID'd, and that was from some Taiwanese or something company, and basically within about a day that had been pulled because they content ID'd the start of the game, which of course would mean any video of Breath of the Wild literally got content ID'd. And of course they were a TV company and they don't own the rights to Breath of the Wild. It's Nintendo. Now, I have nothing against Capcom, Nintendo, or any of the official publishers putting content IDs on our videos. In fact, they're welcome to. They're welcome to the revenue because they're the official. Got to get that practice in. I keep making a lot of silly mistakes. Again, I'll just say, for all legal advice, do contact a lawyer if you ever need it. But yeah, it's an interesting. I do think the system does need some working on at the minute. I don't think it's quite right for people on either sides. This is tucking. There's some slightly weird art in the background. There's a lot of like weird, obscure alien art. It's also mirrored and flipped as well. And I'm really not having a good run at the minute. I really like, 'cause I got to that boss and then he just pipped me. Alright, concentrate, stay high at this point. Right, I'm going to give it a few more stream for another 10 minutes. I'm sure some of you guys might be getting a bit fed up of me failing miserably at this same section. Now I'm going to try and beat the boss because I badly want to. Much like my P-Cross puzzle last night, I was like, yeah, I want to finish this puzzle. And eventually we did it after about an hour. And I still streamed for about another hour. Yeah, I always find it a bit weird when people remix other people's music, because you need the permission and things to do that. And I always think a lot of people, it's like, well, if you're remixing, do your own stuff, not just remix other people's. It's a bit like a lot of games pastiche other games. You're like, well, actually, a lot of them don't necessarily get the pastiching right. I think my issue with a lot of indie games is they've been very hit and miss with their selection, often repeat too much. Or I think the classic one is a lot of indie games just don't get quite, indie developers don't quite get how they used to make games back in this day. So they try and pastiche it and they don't quite get the pastiching right. Right, umpteenth time lucky. Let's do it this time. I've definitely got to I do like the next stage with the ships. That's actually not too hard stage, and then things really ramp up after that. But yeah, if you want to see the true ending, you have to basically... So basically, you have to do hard, and after you clear hard, you get to pro. And in order to get to the true ending, or the end credit stuff, you have to clear pro, and that is a brutally difficult task. Whew. Right, gotcha. Right, time to get to this boss. Let's get him sorted this time. Actually, I'm going to flip my thing just now, just before we get to the actual boss, so that way I can attack from both sides, whichever side the orb actually appears on. Got to avoid it when it goes for the... Really? Is that it? Woot! Yes! That deserves a like. Yeah, you just... A lot of the time you just got to get that super shot just right, and you rail in the damage so heavily. Well, this is actually one of my more favourite stages. This is the massive battleship one. I should also say, if you want to see a video of R-Type 3, we do have one on the channel if you want to see a nice, shiny 4K one. I will get some videos up. I know I haven't been doing that many videos at the minute. It's because I've been working on a huge review. So, cheers, thank you, Stu Rara. Yes, that was much... It was one of those things like, yes, finally. This is one of those games, once you know what you're doing, and it is a real trial and error game, you can then blitz it the next time in like half the time. So I know there are probably a lot of gamers thinking, oh, this looks really tough. And it is tough, but if you practice, if you memorize the stuff, and as long as you're not chatting and you pay attention, you will get there in the end. But don't expect, this is not a game you'll finish in your first run. Just realised the blue lasers weren't actually coming out. Often the game will actually give you the weapon you probably best want. So at this point, yeah, I really want these red ones firing out. Oh yes, I've actually got both the... so, I think I've pretty much got all the power-ups now, which is actually pretty rare. That means I've survived long enough not to... But this is definitely a game where later on, certainly the harder difficulties, you are basically punished for losing the power-ups. In fact, it's, as mentioned, the pro difficulty, which is the loop, once you clear hard, you'll go... I think once you clear a loop, you go into the next loop up. So once you clear hard, you go into pro. And once you clear pro, that's... you get the true ending, sort of the credit stuff. But basically, I saw a video where the guy said, if you die in pro... you were pretty much screwed. He basically said you had to finish it in one go, which is just brutal to do a playthrough without dying. That means really learning the game in every... Okay, in we go. Okay, to the next boss. Now, can I kill this next boss? Not even sure what this boss is. Case in point why this game really annoys me, so it's learning the boss's attack, you die, you're back. Yeah, right, that boss is actually now fortunately this stage is an awful lot easier than the previous one, so I will give it another shot before I finish tonight's stream. I want to quite get to... Yeah, I do actually have Gradius. I would quite like to stream it, but unfortunately that is one game you will get content ID'd on, so... Damn it. There's been a lot of me moaning whenever I die. It's like, "Argh." This is a frustrating game. I did want to put a joke in when we mentioned this at this, when we picked this for the stream, to say something like, will I rip the controller in two by the end of it? And there is an element of that, but I'm just so used to R-Type these days, but it does feel, and I'm probably going to die there. Oh, no, not. There are just so many points in R-Type you do feel like the game is just laughing at you. Come on, charge shot. You can certainly... The charge shot... Oh. The charge shot is... Yeah. Nah, don't worry too much. A little bit. Chatting to people does distract a little bit, but not too much. I blame it more on my tiredness, actually. What capture card are you? Oh, I'm using. We're using an Elgato. It's shown in the descriptions and included in all our videos. We're using Elgato Pro HD 60. However, I'm using an open source scan converter as well. So I'm using my. So for the full rundown, I have my US Super Famicom at the minute. I'm using an RGB SCART cable, RGB SCART cable. I have a Japanese copy of the game. And then that's going into the open source scan converter. And then the open source scan converter is going into the Elgato HD Pro 60. I'm not sure if they still do the HD 60 Pros. It's a few years old now. I assume they would. I'd hope they would. I know they're doing a new 4K card as well. So it gives a very good quality capture, the Elgato. The software you get with it is not so hot. That's the one thing I will say. In fact, I haven't actually updated the software since the Windows 7 updates, since they stopped using Windows 7. I've never downloaded the new version, so I'm just sticking with the old one. Supposedly the new one doesn't work with Windows 7, but I should actually test that out. Okay, apologies, I keep dying. So this might mean that you get to the boss. You do really well, and then after that you continue to die at the same point till you learn the stage with no weapons. Really annoying because that boss isn't. I think that boss is not a hard one at all. It's just when the shots came in, I thought, which of these guys is going to bounce? And it's like, it's bouncing right at me. Open source scan converter pro. I've not heard about that one. I think it's a nice scale of the open source scan converter. It does have some issues. The guy who devised it, Marcus, clearly... I don't think he's a gamer, I'm going to be honest, because there's some really basic issues with the open source scan converter, like interpol. It can't do interlacing very well. Doesn't support composite. It doesn't support S-video. Although I'll be honest, right now is probably the worst time to announce any type of new hardware due to the current world situation, unfortunately. And I suspect I would be... I unfortunately expect things to get a lot worse before they get a lot better, unfortunately, due to being an economist myself. Yeah. Okay, nearly got all my power-ups back now. Oh. So close, yet so far. I'm quite surprised we've had quite a few constant people on this. I'm actually going to just concentrate on this for this now, Stu, just so I can try and get this stage done before I finish the stream. Thanks for watching, everyone. I see we've got quite a few people who've stayed with us, and quite surprising. I didn't know how many people would get on this stream. Didn't know if we'd get that many, seeing as our type's quite but obviously we've got a few shmup fans on the channel. I mean, hence why the name Randomised Gaming is. We do play pretty much every single game going. I'm not a big fan of branded sports, but other than that, largely pretty much every genre going we will play, but even sports we will play from time to time. But yeah, if they do an upgraded open source scan converter, I will definitely pick one up, although I won't buy one on launch because unfortunately, as I found with a lot of the scalers, they generally have a few hardware kinks. I mean, the original open source scan converter was terrible, the first revision. Some weirdness, like the fact it doesn't have the audio for components, and didn't originally have audio for component, which was just downright weird. Meant next to no one could use it for capture. You couldn't play it, and there was some other weirdness. So that's what I mean when I said I didn't think the guy who developed it, Mark, necessarily played it with games in mind, because there was some basic silliness that you'd have thought if you were a gamer you'd have picked that up straight away. Okay, right, let's see if I can get the boss this time. Second time round. Right, so I don't want to... I'll just try and detonate the... A lot of time you just literally detonate the big... You just literally charge that down and detonate the big... Because that super attack is just incredibly insane. Don't think it holds the charge between... So basically, the SNES version is... God, that slowdown, that slowdown. Oh. Go get one last shot. So this is going to be my final run at it, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see how I go. If I clear this, I will carry on till I die next time. But if I don't, I will bid you all adieu with this so far. So not too bad. We got to the 4th stage. Which we're about halfway through the game. Not bad, considering it's been such a long time since I played this. So I'll see, yeah, I'll wrap up after I die this time. But I've been your host, Random Gamer Riven. Thank you for watching. We do have an R-Type Leo playthrough on the channel. We do also have a R-Type 3 also on SNES, a video of that as well for the first stage if you want some more R-Type action after we finish the stream. I want to try and end this stream on a high with killing the boss. That got quite tricky with the fact it added in. I need to take out those additional guns first as well. The other thing is the slowdown on those shots just felt like they were taking forever to charge. I'm just like, come on, come on. So yeah, the speed, there's definitely some slowdown issues with this. I can say it is a great game, and definitely worth. If you like, I mean, if you do like the R-Types, they are tough games, but they are well worth playing if you like them. Come on, let's see if we can get this boss this time. I really want to get this boss so we can end on a high. I don't always think the shots actually come out properly sometimes. Oh! Ah! Oh, that's so annoying. I think I had it as well. I think that was an after. I think I was killed there by an after boss shot. Right, one last shot. Assume we don't die in the process here. Oh, I see, yeah, no, that would have really annoyed me if you got the last batch of the old one. I actually got ours, so I actually got ours last year after they had released about the 1.6 upgrade. I should actually update the firmware on the open source scan converter, because we're currently running an older firmware, but it's been very useful. 1.82 I've been using. But it's one of those ones once you're comfortable with the firmware, and I think, although I think there are probably a few new features now in it. I don't know if they improved the visual quality slightly. Certainly I'd hope they improved compatibility, because a lot of the modes, the X7, I found almost in a lot of cases the X3, X4 and X5 modes literally just don't work with next to nothing. So I think, oddly enough, the Sega Saturn is one of the few consoles I can get the Elgato to work with the X3 mode. So most of them I can't get to work with the X3 mode, and certainly not the X5. Or okay, yep. Know when you are beaten. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching this stream. I've been your host, Random Gamer Riven. Thank you for enjoying it. We've had a few people with us. Fortunately, I couldn't be that last boss. I will probably be back at one point. I will at some point probably get around to doing a full playthrough on this. Maybe even I'll go for pro mode at some point in the future. But thank you for watching. It's been a joy chatting to you. Thank you for joining me, Stu Roro. I will have a look at the Open Source Scan Converter Pro, although at the minute I will... I think it's going to be a few years. I don't think I'll be picking one up anytime in the near future due to the current world situation. But thank you for watching, everyone. Pleasure talking to you, Sturo. I will be back for tomorrow's stream. If you've got any suggestions, by all means, do come along with suggestions. I might go for another SNES game, actually. Keep it in the Super Nintendo family this week. I think maybe only Friday, the Fight Night one, which we still need to decide. But yes, thank you for watching, everyone. Have a good evening, have a good night, or wherever, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I have been your host, Random Game Riven. Hit that like button, and thank you. And see you soon. See you tomorrow, in fact.